Hello, cult members, and welcome to the Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Janice.
And we only have 30 minutes to try to do our best to explain this episode of Game of Thrones.
Here's my explanation for this episode.
Okay, that's all. For those on the podcast feed, we both just touchdown!
Raised our arms in victory.
We're going to do our best to skim through this as best as we can. If you want a very in-depth kind of thing, go to Casterly Talk. They're going to spend an hour and 2 hours, 5 hours talking about what happens in this episode. What we're going to do is run down as many of the highlights as we can and kind of give our feelings about what happened and stuff like that. Let's start off. Their fandom online right now is calling this episode Ginny's Song.
Yeah.
Collider's calling it Enemies from the East.
Yeah.
It's episode 2 of the final season of Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
that's
and
what we got.
apparently HBO isn't releasing the titles until the episodes air, which is why everybody's struggling to come up with
the
titles.
I think we're just gonna go with Ginny's song, because that's what Podrick is singing at the end.
Yeah.
Which is very much Return of the King, when Pippin is singing.
Right.
And
nice.
and there's a very solemnness
Yes.
to that scene, and that was the first thing I thought of.
Oh yeah, nice.
So I'm gonna go with that.
Okay.
Let's start with the intro. The intro is super important to Game of Thrones, we'll probably spend more than we probably should on this. The wall. We start on the north side of the wall. We go through the wall. The ground is all ice. Last week it was changing the ice.
Right.
It was all ice all the way down to Last Hearth.
Right.
Which is showing the progress of the army of the dead.
Right. And they got their last episode, so we know
episode. They show the Weirwood tree, and Godswood is the area around the tree at Winterfell.
Right.
They're also showing Winterfell with a moat around it this time.
Right, which it didn't have in this episode, but makes you think
they kind of showed some stuff with some
digging.
fencing and digging and stuff like that going on. We go into the Great Hall again at Winterfell, and then into the crypts again.
Right. Well, everybody who can't fight is going down there. They talked about that
in the
this episode.
Then we get one of the rings, and the ring this week that caught our attention looks like it's the Lannister lion with maybe a fish in it. We're not really sure. And what I think is White Walker holding a lion's head.
Right.
So,
and then the thing in the middle, we looked and looked and looked, and we could not figure out what that was. I'm sure by Tuesday or Wednesday, the entire internet will know what it is. But if you know what it is, put it in the comments. But the fish is interesting. That's the Tully house symbol.
Right.
Sam is really the only one left there, except for the girls. So why would a lion have a Tully in
don't
its
know.
mouth?
I think there's more importance with either it's a White Walker or a flayed man holding the lion's head. I think that's more of a big deal. But again,
I don't think it's a flayed man. They're all dead.
Yeah. So I don't know what's going on. And then we go to King's Landing, much like we did last week. They show the walls being built around King's Landing. We go down into the basement where the ballista is at. The dragon's skull, and then they go into the Iron Throne, and then we get the last ring, which is the dragons with the comet.
Right, and that I think is the same as it was last week.
Which is the same as last week, which is a urban legend within Westeros of the return of the dragons, where
the comet,
with
the year the comet happened, the dragons were born, blah, blah, blah.
So the episode starts essentially cold after that with the trial of Jaime Lannister inside the Great Hall, and Dany's questioning him and kind of giving him the whole, you killed my father and all this other stuff. There's a ton that happens in this scene, but the important parts is Brienne stands up for Jaime, and then Sansa stands up for Brienne, yeah. Against Dany.
Yeah. And, it's almost... Dany is absolute.
Right.
You killed my father. You wronged my family. My quest for the Iron Throne. And these people are saying, hey, people change, things happen.
Right.
And here's why. And it's kind of the first chink in her
and Danny's armor.
Danny's solid, this is how it is and this is how it's going to be kind of.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe last week with Sam, and her killing his dad and his brother and her having to face that, this is kind of continuation.
And there's another scene later on where Sansa and Danny kind of goes to Sansa and kind of does the whole, maybe we need to get on the same page kind of thing.
Right.
And it looks like they're trying to connect, and they both seem to be doing that. And then eventually in that conversation, Danny says, I love Jon, but I'm doing this for the Iron Throne. And Sansa questions her, like, what about the North?
Right.
We've lost our lands, and what happens? So, again, another kind of chink in Danny's armor of...
She hasn't really thought
everything
beyond this or outside of her little bubble.
Right.
Yeah.
In this, too, Danny also... I didn't know this was kind of where we were going, but kind of as we were going through and thinking about it, it kind of makes sense. Danny really starts to question Tyrion on his decisions, because Jaime, in this trial of Jaime Lannister, pretty much says Cersei's not coming. She has the Golden Army. She has 20,000 fresh soldiers.
Right.
And whenever happens here, she's going to be able to destroy anything else that's left out.
Right. She's waiting for the winner.
Right. And that makes Danny really mad at Tyrion.
Right.
And so there's like all these questions about what's going on with Danny and Tyrion, and
again, her living in absolutes in her own little reality that, oh my God, Tyrion was wrong. It's still his sister. I mean, I get it that she's trying to, she's putting a lot of faith in what he says and believing him when he says you can trust her, but again, you're dealing with human emotions, and you have to look outside of your own little world and understand that not everything is as black and white as
not as black and white as she wants it. It's obviously still about her. We're going to kind of skip ahead. There's a lot more that happens in that scene, but we only kind of get everything in within 30 minutes, so we're trying our best. Gendry and Arya, we'll get into that all in a minute, but there's a whole conversation that they have about Gendry learning about Arya, who she is now, and Arya learning about who Gendry is and how he is the last Baratheon and all that kind of stuff.
Yep, they did a little catching up.
And she ordered her weapon properly by throwing dragon glass into the wall. And
he kind of brushed her off, like, oh, yeah, whatever, I'll get to it when I get to it. And she's like, dunk, 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 and he's like, oh.
I'll get right on that. Jaime is at Winterfell. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on with Jaime at Winterfell. You have the Bran interaction with him at the Weirwood tree, and them going through, Bran saying neither one of us would be here and be the correct people for this battle if you hadn't pushed me out the window.
Right. And Bran's so completely detached from, he's not Bran anymore, that allows that whole situation to happen.
We get Tyrion and Jaime kind of walking through Winterfell, catching up for the first time. Jaime did say that he thinks that the part about Cersei having the baby is actually real,
right?
Even though Tyrion kind of questioned it, now that he's questioning everything that Cersei told him at their meeting in last season. And so Jaime kind of making a point, and then Tyrion coming back at her and saying, no matter what, you always loved her, no matter what she did or what she said or anything.
You were
like
always
that.
blind.
You were always blind to her.
And
so kind of them both questioning each other.
I think, I think that maybe he's still blind about that she's, whether or not she's pregnant. But
I do like that Jorah came and kind of went to Dany and said Tyrion should be your hand, because he does question.
Yeah, that kind of restored her faith, I think, in Tyrion a little bit, and Jorah kind of forced her to understand why he thought that Tyrion was the best man for the job.
Because Dany said, "You're defending a man who took your job."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, because he's the best man for the job."
Yeah. Again, she needs to think outside of her little bubble.
She's still not struggling. In the conversation between Dany and Sansa, they got interrupted by the Maester, and they walked out into the Great Hall, and Theon's back with a small group of the Ironborn.
Right.
And again, there's a scene there where Dany sees what true loyalty and true friendship is when Sansa goes over and gives Theon a big hug.
Yeah.
And Theon explains that Yara went back to the Iron Islands to take back the islands with whatever she had left, and he was there to fight at Winterfell because that's his home.
Yeah, and the Iron Islands are hers. But, after this whole exchange between Dany and Sansa, and they were getting along, and then Sansa points out, what about the North, right? And then they break apart and they go out here, and then Theon walks up to Sansa and gives her a big hug, and again another chink in Dany's armor. Yeah. She doesn't have anybody who's like that.
Even Jorah is like arm's length away from her by her design.
Yeah,
by her design.
Yeah, she's made that, and so this is what true burning your subjects alive
right
is one way to rule.
It's not the best way, but it is one way. We get Thormund, Beric, Edison, and the others who were at Last Hearth rode ahead of the undead and to tell Winterfell, hey, they're on their way and they will be here within a day, is essentially what they say. Yep. Jon and Edison embracing, and Thormund, I thought Jon telling Thormund, I thought you were dead.
Yeah.
We had the big battle meeting.
Everybody's standing around
map. My notes are kind of in kind of strange order, whatever. In that meeting, you have all of the major characters in the North in one room at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is very reminiscent of Robb's meeting before his big battle with the Ramsays in season 2 or season 3 or whatever.
The Lannisters. I don't know if the Ramsays, they might have been there. They might have been part of it, but it was the Lannisters when Jaime got captured.
Yes. So you have all that going on. Bran says the Night King is coming for me, and this is the first time within this whole Three-Eyed Raven storyline that we get Bran is important.
Right. Well, I kind of knew that he touched him and they were connected.
Okay, but there's been no direct here it is.
Yeah.
The Night King is coming for Bran.
Yeah, because they're connected, so he can see through him or whatever.
And so they make up the plan to kind of use Bran as bait.
Yeah.
And Theon, God, Iron Islands. Theon offers to use the Ironborn as his guard.
Right.
And then Jon's like, well, we won't be too far away with all everything that's going on. Through all of that meeting, they all kind of look at each other, and it comes to a realization that, hey, this is it.
Yeah.
This is it. This is everything we've all been worried about. This is everything we've been concerned about. This is that time.
Right.
And they all kind of have a moment of, this is the best plan. We have to go after the Night King no matter what happens.
Right. Which again is reminiscent of the night with Robb in front of the map and his mom saying, is this the best plan? And it's all very reminiscent.
And then we start this collage of different things of the whole probably next
the last night.
The next 30 minutes is about the last night of everybody. This starts off with Grey Worm and Melisandre talking about what their lives are going to be after everything happens.
Yeah.
And do we want to stay in the north? And she's saying, I want to go see my beach again, but people don't fight. And he's saying, I will fight for you, kind of thing. We get Sam and John on the wall again. Finally.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. And they're talking about Sam is missing the point of that whole scene. Sam is missing it by saying, you need to tell Danny. You need to tell Danny. You need to tell Danny.
Yeah.
And then Edison shows up, and then the three of them are all
start giving each other crap and telling Sam, don't you want to go down in the dungeons with the women? Sam's like, I'm the one who's actually killed a White Walker here.
Killed a White Walker. Ghost is there, and that was kind of a nice little thing.
Yep.
We get Jaime and Tyrion like kind of sitting around dreaming about the old days and how
sitting around the hearth drinking
and stuff like that. And then we get this flood of people. We get Davos, Tormund, Brienne, and Podrick all show up, and they all start drinking together and sitting around the fire and telling stories and how we're all Tyrion is actually the one who says we're all going to live and he starts pointing out why all the reasons why everybody is still going to live and about how you made it through the Battle of Bastards and you beat the Hound and all this other stuff. In that scene, though, there's just a bunch of different things. The big thing that I think for me was Tormund asking Brienne why you're not a knight.
Yeah.
And the flirtiness that he's trying to do and her kind of waving it off. And then Jaime kind of saying, a knight can make a knight.
Yeah.
And knights Brienne there, which is all she's ever wanted.
I might have.
Having been a person who has been knighted, I may have cried. And them all, like everybody watching the ceremony is exactly how we all in our medieval reenactment group react when one of our friends is getting knighted. We're all so happy for him. The applaud and everything. And then Podrick sings the song, Jenny's, what are we calling it?
Jenny's song,
which we were talking about earlier.
And of course, I told him, I'm like, he has a magical penis. Of course he has a magical voice.
Right. He can sing. He's actually gotten a lot better at fighting. There was a scene where he's training.
Be knight too.
Yeah. I thought that Tormund was going to go over and kneel with her.
Yeah.
But it kind of takes it away from her.
It does. And that's not really what they are about.
Right. Also, through all this, Arya goes to the wall with the Hound, and they share a drink.
Very much a swapping of places. The Hound is way more how Arya used to be.
Yeah.
And Arya, at the end, she's just like, screw you two, and
Beric ends up showing
Beric
up.
shows up, and the two of them are kind of reminiscent or whatever, and she's like, silly women, kind of something the Hound definitely would have done, and walks off because they're being all sentimental.
Yeah, which is fair because they both kind of almost died or have died a couple of different times, so now they have a chance to kind of think about it.
Yeah, but it's very much a swapping of
of the roles.
6 seasons ago, it would have been Arya, and the Hound would have been like, screw you guys, and walked off.
Okay, so the first big thing that really happens in this episode, Arya's shooting arrows in the basement, trying to get ready. Gendry kind of sneaks in, spies on her, gives her her spear. They have a whole exchange about back and forth about Melisandre and why she wanted him. And Arya starts asking him about how many women you have been with and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And in that conversation, Gendry finally says, I'm Robert Baratheon's bastard son. I'm the only one left, essentially, from the Baratheons. So she didn't know. But then she makes a point of, we're going to die tomorrow. I've never been with anybody. Take your clothes off.
Yep.
And we finally get Jannaria.
That's
we
what
finally
we're
get
going
Jannaria. We've been waiting for it. We finally get it, and it's awesome. It's everything we wanted. I think.
Well, and she takes her shirt off, and she's got all these scars on her side, and he's like staring at her scars, right? And then she's like, I'm not the Red Woman, take your own pants off.
Yeah. And it's very satisfying for both of their characters, because Gendry is hesitant but goes along with it, and Arya's very like she knows exactly what she wants. This is who she is now, and she hasn't experienced this part of her life, and she wants to know about it if she actually does die tomorrow, like everybody thinks is going to happen.
Right.
She wants to have this in her life. And then there's a shot later where when they're singing, when Podrick is singing the song, and they're kind of going through all the different groups, and Gendry's asleep, and she's kind of laying there, her like inquisitive look on her face, like now what? Like, I've done that part. Now what do I want to do? Kind of thing. We get Jorah and Lyanna Mormont meeting finally, but it's in the courtyard of Winterfell, and he's trying to tell her to be in the crypt with everybody else, and she's like, "Screw you! I know how to fight. I was at the Battle of Bastards.
She's at the Battle of Bastards, and it's maybe that meeting wasn't quite as satisfying as I'd hoped. I expected it to be a little more confrontational, but then again, she wasn't around when all that stuff happened with him.
And she has no patience for any of that, whatever happened in the past kind of thing.
Yeah, so it was more like him being just like he is with Dany, your grace, you shouldn't be,
being respectful, but also
you shouldn't be out. And she's like, screw you.
She's got a breastplate on her dress. She's like, she's ready to kick ass.
Yeah.
And then she turns around and walks off with the rest of the Mormont house, and they do their thing.
Like, good to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye. And she calls him cousin.
Yeah.
That was the other thing, too. That was really cool. Sam comes out with Heartsbane and gives it to Jorah. So all the Valyrian steel swords are on the field, ready to go.
Yep.
And Sam makes a point of saying Jorah's father was the one who taught him to be a man, and it seemed more appropriate that Jorah had the sword than him.
Right. Well, and Jon tried to give him
Wolf's
Bane, but
Nightclaw,
Greyclaw, whatever. We're horrible.
I didn't write it down, so.
He tried to give it to him last episode, and Jorah was like, no. So this makes sense. And Sam said, I can't even swing it. It's too big.
Right. I can't even hold it up straight. All right, we have 8 minutes to talk about the final scene.
Okay.
Jon's in the crypt looking at something, and Dany walks in, and she comes and puts her arm around him, and they pan the camera around, and he's standing in front of Lyanna Stark.
Right.
So here we go. Here's the point where Jon's going to tell Dany. And now Dany starts the whole thing off with questioning how she had heard stories of her brother giving money to the peasants and helping people out.
He was such a good guy, and then he turned around and raped her, and that raped Lyanna, and how that didn't make sense. Right,
and then so Jon I just spilt my water. And then Jon tells the story of, no, he loved her. They got married. They had a child. Lyanna told Ned who the real father was on her deathbed and swore to him to raise that child, my real name as Aegon Targaryen. And Dany backs up away from him.
Right.
And immediately starts questioning the information, which is the right answer.
Right, but you can read on her face that this bubble that she has been in and nothing can penetrate is now really starting to burst. And I think, we'll talk about it, but I mean, they have this little confrontation and then immediately go out. The battle has begun, right?
Right.
And she is going to start to think about this as time goes on. The dragons came up to him. They let him ride them. You know, there's all these other signs. But right now, she's like, you are now the usurper to my claim on the throne.
And she even said in her conversation with Sansa, I fell in love with Jon. I'm fighting his war. But ultimately, it's all about me getting the Iron Throne.
Yeah.
That's what that scene was all about.
These are all just pit stops on her road to the throne.
Right. And I think this is going to be a defining moment for Dany, back to the conversation that Sam and John had last week in the crypt, which was, would she give up her throne for the people?
Yeah.
And which is what John has done multiple times.
Right.
And Dany questioning John, you got this information from your brother and your best friend. Like, of course
they would say that to you.
Of course they would say that to you.
Yeah. Except why? He's never wanted it.
Right.
So why would he believe it?
And I think for the first time for John at least, Dany is the one that says you're the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. I don't think Sam. Right. I don't remember Sam saying it last week. Maybe he did, but Dany immediately says that makes you the heir because you're the first male born.
Which again leads to that's the first thing she thinks about.
Right.
Not oh my God, we're related. Right. She never at any point says, oh my God, we're related. It's all, you're now going to take this from me.
Right. So that's the episode for the most part. We actually hit a lot of the major points. There's a lot of little things that go in there. They make a tall, short joke with Drogo and John in there somewhere, which was really funny.
What?
With?
Oh, yeah. Because she tells Sansa, I've only loved one other person like this or whatever.
And he was much taller.
But he was much taller.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other things, but that's the major points. We got the trailer for next week. The Battle of Winterfell begins.
Right.
And
they added 20 minutes to this episode.
And so I'm interested to see what's going to happen. And if they're going to do the Battle of Winterfell in episode 3, that means everything beyond is the ramifications of that battle and the Iron Throne stuff. Now, we know that the episodes get longer as we go along and stuff like that, too.
Right, but there's only 3 more after that, right?
And everything that's happened, everything they showed in the trailer has been shown.
Except for Arya running through the crypts,
which they showed in the trailer for this episode, for episode 3,
and various in the crypts,
right? Which is all that. Right. So everything they've showed is in the first 3 episodes. So we have no clue what's going to happen after this,
right?
And none of this episode was in King's Landing. It was all in Winterfell.
Right.
It was all about. It was another setup episode, and like I said to her, it was an episode that had nothing that happened. But everything happened.
Right. You got closure on a lot closure.
You got some closure. You got some, this is our last night alive.
Yeah. Some satisfaction, I guess.
And you get all of that, and you get the okay, here we go.
Right. And so now we know a lot of characters die, right? Didn't they say a lot of characters die in the Battle of Winterfell?
All kinds of different rumors of different things that happen. So I have all kinds of questions about going forward. But the cool thing about everything is, with the Battle of Winterfell coming and not knowing what happens after that,
right?
That allows us all kinds of speculation. So that's our thoughts on this week's episode. We're going with Jenny's song of episode 2 of Game of Thrones final season. What did you all think? Let us know. Leave us a comment down below. We're trying to film this and podcast record it at the same time, so I'm trying to remember everything that goes with it. We ask you to subscribe to the channel of your choosing. YouTube, it's podcast, Spotify, Google Play, all that kind of different things. Leave us a comment. We also are on all the social media stuff. We're on Facebook at Pop Culture Cult, Pop Culture Cult 1 on the grams of instantness. We're on Twitter at pop_cult1, and we're all over the place now. We're expanding. We got a new logo coming. We're all excited.
Woo-hoo.
So let us know.
Patreon.
Also on Patreon. All that information will be down in the description below. Till next Game of Thrones. Good night, cult members.